For 3 centuries, the Vex Dominion had cut through the galaxy like a scythe through wheat. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They were harvesters. Each world they encountered became another resource to fuel their endless expansion. Its populace assimilated or eradicated, its core stripped of elements to build more of their obsidian-hulled world ships. Commander Torval Axirian stared at the tactical display aboard the TSV Delirium's Edge, humanity's most advanced warship. Across the void, the Vex Armada had materialized at the edge of the Helio system, a fleet so vast it blotted out the stars behind it. "Status report," Axirian demanded, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic projections. His heterochromatic eyes, one blue, one amber, reflected the moving symbols with clinical detachment. Lieutenant Mazaris, his second-in-command, spoke without looking up from her console. 17 Vex world ships, Commander. Standard approach vector. Their harvesting arrays are already deploying. Axirian nodded, his scarred hand stroking the silver medallion he wore. The last remnant of Proxima Colony, his homeworld that had fallen to the Vex 15 years ago. And our orders? Evacuation protocols across all colonies. We're to escort transport vessels until reinforcements arrive. Mazaris hesitated. "Sir, Fleet Command estimates reinforcements in 72 hours. A hollow laugh escaped Axirian's throat. By then, the outer colonies will be ash. The inner world stripped of everything meaningful. He walked to the viewport, observing the gleaming blue jewel of Terra Nova below. Humanity's most populous colony, home to 11 billion souls. How many times have we retreated? How many worlds have we surrendered? 117, sir. The ship's AI, Iris, responded with mathematical precision. Projected civilian casualties from this system alone, 8 billion. Axirian's fist tightened around the medallion. And what does the Delirium's Edge carry that no other ship in human history has possessed? Mazaris looked up, her eyes widening in realization. The Crucible drive, sir. But it's untested. The theoretical yield could. Could what, Lieutenant? Destroy us? And if we retreat, what awaits us but slow extinction? Axirian turned to face his crew, each member watching him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. The Vex believe we will run, as we always have. They've never faced resistance that wasn't merely symbolic. He walked to the central command console, placing his palm on the verification scanner. Iris, bring the Crucible drive online. Plot intercept course with the Vex flagship. The bridge fell silent. Then, Senior Engineer Lodovica spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Commander, if we activate the drive within the gravity well of a star system, the resulting gravitational cascade could—" "I'm aware of the simulations, Engineer." Axirian's voice was steel. "But theory and practice often diverge in ways we can't predict. Sometimes survival requires a leap of faith." He looked at each crew member in turn. "I want order this. Any who wish to evacuate. We're with you, Commander." Mazaris stood at attention, followed by every officer on the bridge. Axirian nodded once, a gesture weighted with gratitude and resolve. "Then let's show the Vex what happens when humanity stops running." He turned back to the viewport as the Delirium's Edge broke orbit, accelerating toward the approaching armada. Second-Edition 1 throughout the ship. All hands to battle stations. The lone human vessel, sleek and gleaming against the void, accelerated toward the wall of Vex world ships, a minnow swimming defiantly toward a school of leviathans. For the first time in 300 years, something unexpected awaited the Vex Dominion. The Delirium's Edge cut through space like a silver arrow, all non-essential systems diverted to the main engines. On the bridge, the crew worked with grim efficiency as the impossible distance between them and the Vex Armada rapidly closed. Vex Command vessel has altered course to intercept, Tactical Officer Renault reported. "They're curious. We're not following evacuation protocols." Axirian nodded. "Good. I want their full attention." In the engine bay, Chief Engineer Lodovica and her team worked frantically to prepare the experimental Crucible drive, humanity's desperate gambit developed in secret over decades. Based on principles discovered in the ruins of an ancient civilization, the drive could theoretically create a localized distortion in space-time, unleashing energy on a scale previously unimaginable. Crucible capacitors at 60% and climbing. Lodovica reported through the comm, "Commander, we've never taken it beyond 40 in simulations." "Push it to 90, Axirian ordered. "We'll need everything she's got." The Vex vessels began adjusting formation. Massive obsidian structures shifted, opening like the petals of nightmarish flowers to reveal harvesting arrays, technology designed to strip entire planets of their resources. They've begun standard intimidation protocols. Mazaris observed as strange harmonic signals washed over their communication systems. Psychoacoustic warfare. "Shut out," Axirian commanded. "Focus on the approach." "Iris, time to intercept." 12 minutes, 17 seconds to optimal deployment range, the AI responded. "Warning, Vex energy signatures indicate weapons charging. They appear confused by our approach vector." A grim smile touched Axirian's lips. For 3 centuries, they've faced retreating prey. Today, they face predators. The first Vex energy pulse missed them by kilometers, a warning shot. The second came closer, heating the edge's shields to near-critical levels. "Return fire," Axirian ordered. "All conventional weapons. Let's keep them interested." The human vessel's railguns spat hyper-accelerated slugs across the void, impacting against the Vex shields with flashes of blue light. The kinetic batteries launched salvos of antimatter-tipped missiles that detonated against the massive world ships. Against any other enemy, such an assault would have been devastating. Against the Vex, it was barely a distraction. "They're launching interceptors," Renault warned. "Hundreds of them." Axirian had expected this. "Activate point defense grid. Maintain course." The space between the opposing forces filled with streaks of light as the Edge's defensive systems engaged the swarm of Vex fighters. Some got through, strafing the human vessel with energy beams that carved glowing gouges in its armor. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 9, an officer shouted. "Seal those sections," Axirian commanded. "Crucible status?" 82% and climbing, Lodovica reported, her voice tense as alarms blared in the background. "But sir, we've got coolant leaks throughout the system. If we push to 90, we have no choice." Axirian cut her off. "If we fail here, there will be no second chance for humanity." The Delirium's edge shuddered as another barrage struck its shields. Emergency systems wailed as power fluctuated throughout the ship. "We've lost engines 3 and 4, the helmsman reported. "Compensate with remaining thrust," Axirian ordered. "Iris, time to optimal deployment." 3 minutes, 40 seconds. Vex command vessel is now actively maneuvering to disable us. The massive Vex flagship, a behemoth of black metal and pulsing purple energy, was now directly ahead, its harvesting arrays fully deployed like the maw of some cosmic predator. "They still don't understand," Axirian said quietly. "They think we're trying to ram them." Crucible at 87%. Lodovica shouted over the comm, "Commander, we're seeing microfractures in the containment field." "Hold it together, Chief," Axirian urged. "Just a little longer." As the Edge approached the Vex flagship, a targeted tractor beam seized the human vessel, slowly drawing it toward the world ship's processing chamber, where countless civilizations before had been systematically dismantled for resources. Axirian's eyes gleamed with fierce determination. "Exactly as we wanted. All hands, brace for crucible activation." Lodovica lighted up. In the heart of the ship, surrounded by warnings and failing systems, Chief Engineer Lodovica made the final calibrations to the experimental drive and whispered a prayer to whichever gods might be listening. Then she pressed the activation sequence. The universe held its breath. The crucible drive activated with a sound no human language had words for, a reality-twisting resonance that seemed to exist simultaneously in every atom of the ship. For a heartbeat, the Delirium's edge became both infinitely heavy and weightless, as fundamental forces recalibrated around it. Crucible field stabilizing. Lodovica reported through gritted teeth as she fought to keep the experimental drive from tearing itself apart. 91% capacity and holding. On the bridge, crew members clutched their stations as space itself seemed to bend around their vessel. Through the viewport, the stars stretched and warped like reflections in rippling water. The massive Vex flagship, which had trapped them in its tractor beam, began to visibly distort as the space-time distortion field expanded. Their increasing tractor beam power, Mazaris reported, blood trickling from her nose, a side effect of the intense gravitational fluctuations. They don't understand what's happening. Axirian watched as the Vex world ship's harvesting arrays began to retract. They sensed danger. "Iris, give me ship-wide." The commander's voice echoed throughout the groaning vessel. "All stations, this is Axirian. The Crucible is holding. We're about to make history, or become it. Either way, remember why we fight. Remember Terra Nova. Remember everyone we've lost." In the science lab, xenobiologist Dr. Voltern was frantically analyzing the telemetry from the Vex flagship. "Commander, I'm detecting unprecedented energy readings from the Vex vessel. They're attempting some kind of emergency jump sequence. They can't jump while holding us," Tactical Officer Renault observed. "They'd have to release the tractor beam." Axirian's eyes narrowed. "They won't. The Vex never abandon a capture. Their entire psychology revolves around consumption and assimilation. They'll try to contain the Crucible effect instead." As if confirming his words, the Vex flagship began to emit a strange purple field that enveloped both vessels, a containment mechanism designed to neutralize the space-time distortion. "Crucible field is encountering resistance," Lodovica reported. "The Vex are trying to dampen it with some kind of anti-resonance field. Push it to 95%, Axirian ordered. "Sir, that's beyond safety parameters." "The containment." "Do it, Chief." "That's an order." The ship groaned as the Crucible drive's output increased. Warning signals flashed across every console on the bridge as structural integrity began to fail throughout the vessel. "Hull breach on Deck 12, an officer reported. Emergency bulkheads failing." But Axirian remained focused on the tactical display, watching as the Crucible field expanded further, now engulfing the entire Vex flagship. The purple containment field flickered and wavered. "It's working," Mazaris whispered. The first fissures appeared in the obsidian hull of the Vex world ship, hairline fractures that spread like lightning across its surface as space-time itself buckled and warped around it. The tractor beam holding the Delirium's edge fluctuated but held firm. "They still won't let go," Renault observed in disbelief. "No," Axirian agreed. "They can't comprehend defeat. For 3 centuries, they've known only victory." He turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to the Vex flagship." "Sir." The officer looked up in surprise. "We've never successfully established communication with them. They'll hear this." Axirian's voice was iron. "Broadcast on all frequencies." When the channel opened, Axirian spoke clearly, his words resonating through the static. "This is Commander Torval Axirian of the Terran ship Delirium's edge to the Vex Dominion. For 300 years, you've harvested our worlds, consumed our people. Today that ends. Humanity will run no more. We will fight, and we will win. Remember us as the ones who said, 'No more.'" The Vex flagship shuddered violently as critical systems throughout its structure began to fail under the space-time distortion. Secondary explosions bloomed across its surface like deadly flowers. "Crucible at 97%. Lodovica shouted. "Commander, we can't contain it much longer." Axirian nodded. "We don't need to. Iris, calculate optimal detonation sequence. When the Crucible field reaches critical mass, I want maximum effect on the Vex command structure." "Calculating," the AI responded. "Optimal detonation, 3 minutes, 12 seconds. As the countdown began, the Delirium's edge shuddered violently. Sections of a ship began to tear away under the combined stress of the Crucible field and the Vex tractor beam. "Evacuation order," Axirian announced calmly. all non-essential personnel to escape pods. He turned his bridge crew. I need volunteers to remain and ensure detonation sequence. Every officer on the bridge stayed seated. It has been my honor, Axirian said simply. The universe held its breath as two titans, one massive and ancient, one small but defiant, remained locked together on the edge of mutual destruction. The final moments aboard the Delirium's edge unfolded in a surreal haze of alarms, structural groans, and the eerie luminescence of the crucible field. Time itself seemed to stretch and contract as the experimental drive pushed past all theoretical limits. Crucible at 98%. Lodovica's voice crackled through failing communication systems. Containment field showing critical microfractures. We're past the point of no return, Commander. On the bridge, now illuminated only by emergency lighting and the strange, pulsing glow emanating from the viewport, Axirian watched as the massive Vex flagship continued to fracture before them. The obsidian hull, once impenetrable, now resembled cracked glass, with energy bleeding through the fissures. They're attempting to adapt, Mazaris observed, analyzing readings from what sensors remained functional. The Vex are reconfiguring their hull structure at the molecular level, trying to compensate for the space-time distortion. Too little, too late, Axirian said with grim satisfaction. Iris, time to optimal detonation. 1 minute, 47 seconds. The AI's voice fluctuated between octaves as the ship's systems deteriorated. Warning, Vex fleet is altering formation. Additional vessels moving to reinforce flagship. The tactical display showed 3 more world ships breaking formation, accelerating toward their position. Massive shadows against the void, coming to aid their beleaguered leader. Renault looked up from his console. Sir, if more Vex ships enter the crucible field before detonation, the effect multiplies, Axirian finished. Exactly what we want. A violent shudder ran through the ship as another section of hull tore away. The escape pods had launched minutes earlier, carrying most of the crew safely away from the impending detonation. Now only the bridge crew, engineering team, and a handful of others remained. Sir, Mazaris said quietly, the crucible effect has begun destabilizing the star's outer corona. If the detonation occurs this close to Helios, Axirian nodded grimly. Terra Nova. The planet should be shielded by its position on the far side of the star, but the outer colonies. She didn't finish the sentence. The commander made his decision. Iris, can we still maneuver? Minimal thrusters operational. Approximately 22% capacity remaining. Plot a course away from the star. Maximum possible distance before detonation. Course plotted. Warning. Vex tractor beam still active. Attempting evasive maneuvers will increase structural stress by 300%. Axirian exchanged glances with his bridge crew. No words were needed. Each face showed the same resolve. Execute, he ordered. The Delirium's edge strained against the Vex tractor beam, its remaining thrusters burning white-hot as they fought against the immovable force. For a moment, it seemed nothing would happen. Then, with a wrenching sound that resonated through the entire ship, something gave way. It wasn't the tractor beam. Hull integrity critical, Mazaris shouted above the cacophony of alarms. We've lost 40% of the ship's structure. But they were moving. Slowly, agonizingly, the joined vessels, the tiny human ship and the massive Vex flagship still locked together by the tractor beam, began to drift away from the star and the inhabited worlds it nurtured. Engineering to bridge. Lodovica's voice was barely audible through the static. The crucible's reaching quantum resonance. Field strength at 99%. We can't hold it much longer. Just a little further, Axirian urged. Iris, time to detonation. 53 seconds. On the tactical display, the 3 approaching Vex world ships were now close enough to be caught in the expanding crucible field. Their hulls began to show the same stress fractures as their flagship. Sir, Renault called out. The Vex are broadcasting something. A signal unlike anything they had encountered filled their communications array. Not the usual psychoacoustic warfare, but something different. Complex mathematical patterns intertwined with harmonic frequencies. They're trying to communicate, Mazaris realized. For the first time in 3 centuries of conflict, they're actually attempting to communicate. Axirian's expression hardened. Too late. They had centuries to try diplomacy. Iris, open a channel. When the AI complied, Axirian spoke his final message to the Vex Dominion. You could have chosen to coexist. Instead, you chose to consume. Remember humanity as the species that refused to be devoured. With that, he closed the channel and turned to what remained of his crew. It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve with each of you. What we do today changes everything. The ship groaned as more sections tore away. The Crucible drive had now reached critical resonance, its effects spreading throughout both vessels and beginning to envelop the approaching Vex reinforcements. 30 seconds to detonation, Iris announced. Axirian looked out at the stars one last time. For Terra Nova, for humanity, no more running. As the final countdown began, the Crucible drive reached 100% capacity, and reality itself prepared to tear. The detonation of the Crucible drive wasn't an explosion in any conventional sense. There was no blinding flash, no thunderous boom that would dissipate through the vacuum of space. Instead, it was as if a seam in reality itself was pulled apart, revealing something underneath that human eyes were never meant to perceive. The space-time distortion, contained until that moment within the faltering field generators of the Delirium's edge, expanded outward in concentric ripples. The Vex flagship, still clutching the human vessel in its tractor beam, was the first to experience the full effect. Its obsidian hull didn't merely break. It unraveled, molecular bonds dissolving as fundamental forces rewrote themselves within the cascade field. From the observation deck of the colony ship Helios Ascendant, safely evacuated to the far side of the system, First Minister Alara Veridum watched the distant event through specialized filters. Even at this distance, the sensors struggled to interpret what was happening. The readings can't be accurate, her science advisor whispered, staring at the data flowing across screens. According to this, the very fabric of space in that region is folding in on itself. Minister Veridum's expression remained composed, though her eyes revealed the weight of knowledge. Commander Axirian knew the theoretical yield. He understood what he was unleashing. Back at the epicenter of the event, the 3 Vex world ships that had approached to reinforce their flagship were caught in the expanding cascade. Like their leader, they began to distort and dissolve, their complex structures unable to maintain coherence as physics itself became malleable within the field. Aboard what remained of the Delirium's edge, time moved strangely. For Commander Axirian and his bridge crew, the final moments stretched into what felt like hours, a peculiar gift from the warping of temporal dimensions. "It's beautiful," Mazaris whispered, watching through the viewport as reality rippled and flowed around them. Blood from various injuries had dried on her face, but her expression showed only wonder. Axirian nodded, his hand still clutching the medallion from his lost homeworld. "Worth it. Worth everything," she confirmed. The Crucible's effect continued to expand, now engulfing all 4 Vex world ships completely. Throughout the massive vessels, the highly organized Vex hierarchy experienced something they had never known in their 3 centuries of uncontested conquest: panic. For the first time, the collective Vex consciousness faced a force they could neither consume nor adapt to. Their desperate attempts to communicate continued, mathematical patterns growing increasingly chaotic as they tried to convey concepts that might halt the cascade. Across the bridge of the Delirium's edge, systems failed in sequence as the ship surrendered to inevitability. Yet Iris, the ship's AI, maintained core functionality long enough to capture and transmit every moment of the unfolding event. Signal strength failing, Iris reported. However, Quantum Entanglement Beacon is still operational. All telemetry is being transmitted to Fleet Command. They will know what happened here. Good, Axirian said simply. The rest of the Vex Armada, the remaining 13 world ships, have halted their advance. They appear to be retreating. A tired smile crossed the commander's scarred face. They've never retreated before. How does it feel to make history, Iris? I lack sufficient parameters to answer that question, Commander. However, mission objectives have been achieved. The Vex advance has been halted. As the quantum cascade reached its final phase, the structure of the Delirium's edge finally surrendered to the forces tearing it apart. Yet instead of pain or fear, the bridge crew experienced something unexpected, a strange serenity as their consciousness expanded alongside the crucible field. The last thing Commander Axirian saw was not darkness, but light, pure and unfiltered, as if glimpsing the universe from outside time itself. Far across the system, Minister Veridum watched as the distant point of light that marked the confrontation pulsed once, brilliantly, then collapsed in on itself, leaving nothing but void where 4 Vex world ships and 1 human vessel had been. Order all long-range sensors to track the remaining Vex vessels, she commanded. They're accelerating away from the system, her tactical officer confirmed. All 13 remaining world ships. They're fleeing. Veridum closed her eyes briefly, offering silent thanks to Axirian and his crew. Then, with renewed resolve, she addressed her staff. Send word to Fleet Command. The Vex Dominion has finally tasted defeat, and humanity now has the weapon to end their reign of terror for good. As the colony ship's engines ignited, carrying the survivors back toward Terra Nova, something unprecedented spread through human space faster than any vessel could travel. Hope. 3 months after the Battle of Helios, Admiral Nyara Veridum stood before the assembled representatives of the united human colonies in the Grand Chamber of the Terran Concordat. Behind her, a massive holographic display showed the completed schematics for the new Crucible-class vessels, warships built around refined versions of the experimental drive that had changed the course of history. The data transmitted by the Delirium's edge in its final moments has proven invaluable, she explained to the assembly. Our scientists have stabilized the Crucible technology. The space-time distortion can now be controlled, focused, and, most importantly, sustained without catastrophic failure. Quiet murmurs rippled through the chamber. For centuries, humanity had known only retreat and loss. The possibility of actually pushing back against the Vex seemed almost too much to hope for. First Minister Alara Veridum, the Admiral's mother and the same woman who had watched the Delirium's Edge's final stand from the evacuation vessel, rose to speak. And the Vex? What intelligence do we have on their movements since Helios? Admiral Veridum nodded to her tactical officer, who updated the holographic display. The Vex Dominion has withdrawn from 7 previously contested systems. They've established a defensive perimeter at these coordinates. The display highlighted a region of space far from any human colony. For the first time in 3 centuries, they are not advancing. They are consolidating. A skeptical representative from the outer colonies stood. How can we be certain they aren't simply regrouping for a more devastating counterattack? We can't, Admiral Veridum admitted. But we've continued to study the communication attempts they made in their final moments. Our xenolinguists believe they were not merely panic responses, but actual attempts at establishing dialogue. The chamber erupted in shocked discussions. The idea that the Vex, viewed for centuries as mindless consumers of worlds, might actually be capable of diplomatic interaction was revolutionary. When order was restored, the Admiral continued. We believe the Helios encounter fundamentally changed their perception of humanity. Before, they saw us only as resources to be harvested. Now, they recognize us as a threat to their existence. And that's supposed to be reassuring, another representative challenged. It's the beginning of respect, Admiral Veridum countered. And respect is the foundation of any meaningful dialogue. She gestured, and the holographic display changed again, showing the newly commissioned TSV Phoenix Ascendant, the first of the Crucible-class vessels. Its sleek hull gleamed silver against the backdrop of stars, the unmistakable crucible drive housing prominent at its core. The Phoenix Ascendant will lead a fleet of 5 vessels to the edge of Vex territory. Their mission is twofold: to demonstrate our defensive capabilities and to attempt establishing formal communication. We believe the Vex may finally be receptive. First Minister Verdum nodded slowly. And if they aren't, then we will make them understand that humanity will never again be prey. The Admiral's voice carried the same steel that had been present in Commander Exerian's final message. But I believe there's a chance for something better than endless war. The Crucible didn't just change space-time physics. It changed the fundamental dynamic between our species. As the council session concluded, Admiral Verdum found herself in the Memorial Garden overlooking the vast cityscape of New Terra. A monument had been erected there, a perfect replica of the Delirium's edge, rendered in gleaming obsidian and silver, eternally breaking free from stylized chains that represented the Vex tractor beam. She placed her hand on the plaque that bore the names of those who had been lost, her fingers lingering on one in particular, Commander Torval Exerian. "We did it, Uncle," she whispered. "We're not running anymore." A gentle breeze stirred the memorial garden as the setting sun cast long shadows across the monument. Throughout human space, shipyards hummed with activity as the new Crucible fleet took shape. On distant outposts, refugees began the journey back to worlds they had abandoned to the Vex advance. For the first time in centuries, colony ships were traveling outward rather than inward. 6 months later, the Phoenix Ascendant approached the designated coordinates at the edge of Vex territory. Admiral Verdum stood on its bridge, watching as 3 Vex vessels materialized from hyperspace before them. Unlike the world ships of the past, these were smaller, clearly designed for diplomacy rather than harvesting. Their obsidian hulls still gleamed with the same unsettling darkness, but their harvesting arrays were noticeably absent. "They've matched our approach and are holding position," her tactical officer reported with barely contained amazement. "No weapons signatures detected." Admiral Verdum nodded. "Open a channel on all frequencies. Use the mathematical language our xenolinguists developed based on their final transmission." As the signal was transmitted, tension filled the bridge. Centuries of conflict couldn't be erased in a moment. Trust would take time, perhaps generations. But when the Vex responded with their own mathematical sequence, one that the ship's computers translated as an acknowledgement, Admiral Verdum allowed herself a small smile. The legacy of the Delirium's edge and its brave crew had forever changed the course of 2 civilizations. Where once there had been only consumption and retreat, now there existed the fragile possibility of understanding. Humanity had said no more, and in doing so, had opened the door to what next. As negotiations began between species that had known only war, the stars themselves seemed to burn a little brighter, not with the fires of destruction, but with the light of possibility. A future where defiance had created the opportunity for something neither humanity nor the Vex had dared imagine: peace. In the vast memorial garden on Terra Nova, the monument to the Delirium's edge caught the first light of dawn. For just a moment, it seemed to glow from within, as if the spirits of those who had sacrificed everything were watching over the new chapter their courage had written. A chapter that began with 1 ship, 1 crew, and the simple, powerful defiance of saying, "No more."